So good evening to all. It's once again brave evening to all. So on behalf of Chennai Institute Technology Business Incubator, so I welcome you once again everyone to our Innovators Pitch Series. So everyone have crossed across around 5 to 7 and more than 8 series we so far. So under the Innovator sorry for the term. So under the Innovators Pitch Series today we have Mr. Satish Shalvati, so CEO and consultant of blockchain technology. I think everyone may be aware of the blockchain technology, so which is getting boom nowadays. So you have to get some exposure about the blockchain technology. That's why we have brought the concerned experts under our Innovators series. Simple, I can say in one word that we are the traceability and reliability. So I can say from my side, and also there are a lot of booms under the blockchain technology. So the audience take use of the session, and you will have a good session. So I'll come back to you after 45 minutes with a good questionnaire and a reply also. So let me invite Mr. Satish Shalvati to proceed with the session. Sir, please proceed with your side, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Very good evening, everyone. Yeah. It's wonderful to be a part of this session. Thanks to Pragadish and the team which have organized this. So a quick introduction. My name is Satish and I run a company called Intellytech Solutions. We are a blockchain technology solutions company. And essentially this session is going to be about giving people an introduction to blockchain. So a lot of people have heard about blockchain, have probably read about blockchain. Most people would have heard about Bitcoin. There are a lot of misconceptions about blockchain. So the idea here in the next 45 minutes to 1 hour is to understand what exactly is blockchain. So basic conceptual understanding of blockchain, what brought about this technology, what are the different aspects to this technology, how does it work, what are the different utilities or use cases in this technology. Those are the kind of things that we'll try and cover. Okay, so let me quickly start my presentation. Yeah, can you all see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the first thing that I want to actually show you guys is this is a word cloud made up of all the concepts that you have to learn about if you want to get into blockchain. Like Pragadish had said, this is a topic that there is a lot of discussions around every tech conference or every tech discussion. Blockchain is being explored. So it's important for students as well as professionals to understand what blockchain is. Some of you might have aspirations to get into blockchain in terms of a career. Some of you might want to understand what blockchain is all about and see how you can use it in any work that you get into. So it's important that in any case, having a good understanding of blockchain is important. So essentially, if you see, these are typically all the concepts that you probably have to learn. What we will try and do in today's session is to cover a few of these. Things like what is a blockchain, what is nonce, what is hash. Those are the kind of things we will cover today. Those are the basic building blocks, right? Some of these other concepts over a period of time you can start learning. This is an introduction. So what is the need and genesis? Where did this come from? What was the need for a solution like this? And how did it all start? So that's what we will begin with. So I'm going to start with how we evolved as human beings, right? So essentially we started as hunter-gatherers. So human beings were hunter-gatherers and had a nomadic lifestyle, which means you'll not stay in one place. You go hunt and keep moving, right? Then we moved to agricultural settlements. So essentially what happened here is that people learned how to cultivate. And with that came the concept of settling in a particular location. So you will have small settlements where people would cultivate and live there. So you had this concept of small communities or small settlements that started happening. Then came the Industrial Revolution. Now, this happened a few hundred years back. So the Industrial Revolution was very, very important in terms of how we evolved. What Industrial Revolution did was that it brought the concept of these large communities, or some of these are cities that we have today, which were centered around huge industries that came. So what happened is you had large communities. So you had thousands of people living in a particular area. Now what this led to was a need to have a very structured and systematic rules, regulations, and then came the centralized authorities. So typically, a centralized authority is anything, RBI is a centralized authority, the government is a centralized authority. So any authority which represents people, represents individuals, and is authorized to take decisions on their behalf, right? So those are typically centralized authorities. And why this is important to understand is there is a particular philosophy. So the reason why blockchain is important are at two levels. One is in terms of what it can do for us as citizens of a country, in terms of what kind of transformative things can happen with it. Secondly, how can it impact business and business processes. So with this as the background, what happened after the industrial revolution is, while the centralized agencies and authorities and centralization itself helped in giving services to people and bringing in some order, this whole idea of centralization itself became difficult or started having a lot of issues. So with centralization today, we have a lot of corruption. So it's become, all of us will agree that corruption has become very, very, a key piece of centralization. So wherever we go, whether it's for a simple service that as a citizen we want, there is corruption, right? So there is a huge challenge that we face today. So the trust in the established centralized entities is going down, right? So why is this important to understand? There is a particular way of why do we have these centralized systems? Because it was the only way that a large population and a large set of services could be administered. And because of that, now the dependence on centralized systems, centralized authorities, centralized regulators has gone up. But the fact is that the trust in these systems entities has gone down because of all the corruption, non-value adding intermediaries, a lot of the time it takes, a lot of issues that come with it. The other important aspect to note is that this is a survey that was done by World Economic Forum, where they had identified the 5 risks that are most likely to happen in the next 10 years. So if you see these 5, you can see that the first one is natural extreme weather events, then there's natural disasters, there's cyber attacks, data fraud or theft, and failure of climate change mitigation. Of the 5 risks, 3 of them have to do with climate and weather, but the 2 that we are going to focus on is cyber attacks and data fraud, right? We are seeing that the world is moving towards a largely digital society. Most of what we do today, right, has a digital angle. So whether it's about buying something online or transacting, or most of what we do has a digital angle, whether it's studying, whether it's transacting. So it's important that the need to secure data has become very important, even more so in the last 5-6 years after COVID has hit us. We are seeing on a daily basis news reports that with COVID, the number of cyber attacks and data fraud or theft has gone up multifold, right? So it's important that we are able to try and mitigate this also. So this has also become important. So safety and security of data has become a global problem. So the first one I spoke about is the challenges that come with centralization, centralized authority, centralized regulation, right, and centralized systems, as well as the need for safety and security of data. These are 2 critical aspects that are important for us to consider when we look at a new technology, right? So then how and where did it all begin? This was the basic background. So how and where did this begin? So if you look at, I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about the major market crash that happened in the US in 2008-9, right? About 10-12 years back. There was a huge slowdown, and what started in the US spread to the rest of the world. If you look at the reasons, there are multiple reasons that led to the slowdown. The common aspect in all of this, if you see, is that a lot of these are because of poor decisions that have been made by some of these centralized agencies, whether it's failure of corporate governance, housing crash, or various excessive leverage in financial institutions. So people who had invested a lot of their hard-earned money in financial instruments actually lost a lot of it. A big crisis happened with people who put in their retirement funds also. A lot of those things started happening, and a common thread among this was, the issue of decisions being taken on. So, for example, if I have invested my money, somebody else is taking the decision on my behalf, right? So those are all kind of things that can and could be avoided. So there was a lot of discussion in the general public about why is this happening, is there a way out. So then essentially what happened is that in 2008-9 there was a white paper that was launched. This is the background. Some people were trying to see if there can be a solution to this. So there was a white paper that was launched or published in the public domain, which was actually titled Bitcoin. So that was the starting point of something called Bitcoin. So it was nothing but a simple white paper that was published, and anybody could read it. And what it had basically expressed, or what was explained in that note, was a new financial transaction methodology, a completely new methodology to digitally transact, especially in terms of currency and money. So they wanted to create a completely new system, and this was a idea, or it was more of a concept note, which said that it is possible to do away with centralization. It's possible to bring in decentralization. It's possible to bring in peer-to-peer transaction and communication, and this is how you do it. So that was more like a concept note, right? And we all know that in 2009 is when an actual practical solution or the practical implementation of what was there in the white paper actually happened, and which is what is Bitcoin. So the first thing to clarify here is Bitcoin is not equal to blockchain, right? Bitcoin is a part of blockchain, right? So the best way to understand is Bitcoin is what the first implementation or the first use case on a larger protocol or a system called blockchain, right? So blockchain itself is not completely new in terms of technology. It is an integration of various concepts that have come together, which is why we spoke about hashing, we spoke about decentralization, distributed systems, cryptography. All these have been around for some time. But the beauty of blockchain is that it was able to bring all of this together and put together a protocol which helped in solving a lot of problems. Initially, it was launched more as a solution for currency, money, and financial markets. But eventually, a lot more problems could be solved using this backbone, which is today known as the blockchain, right? So the journey of blockchain started with Bitcoin. So let me just one slide on Bitcoin. What exactly is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a consensus-based peer-to-peer network, which means that there is a direct one-on-one or a direct peer-to-peer connectivity. There is no need for intermediaries. That's a very important point to note. It enables a payment system and is a completely decentralized digital currency. So there's been a lot of talk about a digital currency many years for the last 20-25 years. And this was a system that showed people how it can be done as a safe, secure, and foolproof system, right? The network, the Bitcoin network, consists of the same copy of a digital file listing accounts like a ledger. So it's essentially like a ledger. Difference being that it's a ledger where a copy of the ledger is maintained across multiple nodes or multiple systems which is connected to the network. Why that is required, how that helps, all of that we will see. But this is the starting point. Let's now look at some of the core problems that blockchain solves. So till now, what we've understood is there was a background to this. The centralization had issues. We have a lot of data-related challenges that we faced. So there is in about 10-12 years back, a group of people, we still don't know who this is, somebody called Satoshi Nakamoto had launched this as an alternative system. And what fascinated people over a period of time is the backbone technology that was used to launch the system of Bitcoin was something that we realized later could also be used for multiple other things, right? So what kind of problems does this new technology called blockchain solve? First thing is, in any large system, there is a need for something called a consensus. Now, the example of consensus, I'll again try and explain a lot of these with very simple examples. So this, I generally, when I do these sessions face to face, I ask people what they understand from this. I get a lot of responses. The most common one, people say, this is something to do with animals. This is an elephant, right? And this is probably some sort of a rock museum, right? But actually, this is probably one of the earliest versions of a currency, a coin. So you see a coin with so this is the earliest version of a coin, for example, in Micronesian Islands. Why is this important? So the story is that in Micronesian islands, say a few thousand years ago, there were only few, let's say in the island, there were about, say, 10,000 people in total. So what they would do is they will all gather on a daily basis in one place, right, every day. And that is where all the transactions would happen. For example, if I wanted to, I have, say, a few acres of land, and I want to transfer that land to somebody else, right? And in that gathering of all the people in that community, I would say in front of everyone that today I am transferring this land to so and so. Let's say A is transferring it to B. So henceforth, this particular land belongs to B. So the land or the property or the currency owned was indicated by a rock like this. So they would say this so and so from now on belongs to somebody else. Now, why this is important to understand is the information that this transaction has happened is in everybody's mind. So there are 1,000 people, for example, all of whom are privy to this information that this particular land has been transferred from so and so. So if tomorrow somebody comes and says, if C comes and says this land belongs to me, the 1,000 people or the 9,999 people other than the person who did it are going to say, no, we actually saw the transaction happen. We were privy to this information. We were part of the network which validated this actual transaction. So this is just a parallel of how a blockchain system works. So there are thousands. So you replace the people with the computers or the nodes. And the role the nodes play is in validating a transaction and in ensuring that nobody tries to tamper with it or cheat, right? So there's an interesting video about this. I will not play it now because we don't have too much time. I will share this presentation with all of you. Later, please go through these videos and learn. The other problem that blockchain solves is something called the Byzantine generals problem. So essentially, this is a mathematical problem that's taken many hundreds of years to solve. So if you look at, Byzantine is a kingdom. So if you look at this, think of this as a kingdom. Let's say this is a very powerful kingdom. And these are all, let's say, smaller kingdoms. Just for argument's sake, let's say this large kingdom is a problematic or an evil kingdom, but it's pretty large. And all the other kingdoms surrounding that kingdom want to defeat this kingdom. So let's say this kingdom has, say, an army of 1,000 people, and there are 10 other small kingdoms, each one having an army of, say, 115 or 120 people. So the only way all of them could defeat this kingdom is by coming together. So all of them have to come together and attack the kingdom at the same time. If that happens, so there is a need for communication between multiple people and the urge to not cheat and do this. So typically what happens is if there are traitors, right, what will happen? So even if there is, here we're showing about 3 or 4 traitors, even if there is one traitor who doesn't take part, you cannot defeat this. So the purpose is not achieved. So you think of this in a modern system as traitors are typically people who try and, say, cyber attackers or people who try and create issues in a system, and how everybody should come together to ensure that doesn't happen, right? So blockchain as a protocol solves this by automating trust using this concept of consensus and various other cryptographic measures. So each army in this can be thought of as a node in the system, and the messages can be thought of as transactions, and the enemy city can be thought of as any man in the middle. So man in the middle attack is a famous problem that we keep talking about in terms of how you can solve that, right? So anybody who wants to alter the blockchain. So this is typically how Byzantine generals problem is also being solved. The other important problem that this solves is a problem of double spend. So what exactly is double spend? So in the concept of a regular currency, all of us carry cash. Let's say I have a 2,000 rupee cash note, and I give it to, I'm A and I give it to B, right? And what happens is this physical note of 2,000 rupees moves from my hand to that other person. So I don't have it with me anymore, right? So I have given it. There is no need to worry about any proof of whether it's been given or not. Imagine the same transaction happening digitally, right? If I were to send money digitally, let's say, just to give an easy example, let's say I give a PDF document has to be sent. Is there something called an original PDF document, and can there be a way in which only that particular person can get only one copy of that? That's not possible, right? Because you can send the PDF document to multiple people, right? And which means that particular currency can actually be sent out to multiple people, that's double spend. So you can do it multiple times. So this had to be solved. So they also came up with protocols to solve this double spend problem. So these are the key issues that the system of blockchain, which had this system of Bitcoin, which had this blockchain as the backbone, tried to solve. So now let's look at what exactly what are the different things that go into it and what exactly blockchain is. So in essence, blockchain is a type of a distributed ledger, right? In simple words, think of it as a distributed database, right? It comprises of unchangeable digitally recorded data in packages called blocks. So this is very important. One of the key attributes of the blockchain is that it has data recorded in what are known as digital blocks. And one of the key attributes is that these are unchangeable. Any data that you put into the blockchain is immutable, right? You can't make any changes. You can't delete or modify the data that is being put into the blockchain. It's very important to understand. Each block in the chain contains transaction data. So these digital blocks are actually linked together in a linear chain. And each block in the chain contains transaction data. Now, what is this transaction data? It can be anything. It can be money transfer, transfer of ownership of property. It can be anything, transfer of information. It can be anything, right? And these blocks of data, like I said, are stored in a linear chain. The advantage is that there is no single point of failure or downtime, which is why I said because there are thousands of computers connected. If you talk of what is known as a public blockchain, the example is Bitcoin or what is known as Ethereum. It's a public blockchain. So there are, for example, Ethereum today has more than 50,000 nodes, which means there are 50,000 nodes that are connected to this network, which help in validating these transactions, creating blocks using an inbuilt consensus mechanism. So whatever examples we saw in the physical world, right, to ensure consensus happens, we've tried to replicate it in a technology-enabled protocol, which is known as the blockchain. So 3 or 4 concepts we've already seen in this: distributed ledger, blocks, transaction data, right? And so this has been designed in such a way that there's no single point of failure. A blockchain can be public or permissioned. So public blockchain is typically, like I said, something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, which is permissionless, which means it's a system that is already predefined and can be used where you can't make too many changes. A permission blockchain in the other end is something where the blockchain at a protocol level itself, you can make changes. You can make changes to the consensus mechanism. You can make changes to who's going to do what. You can create rules. Those are all things that can be done in a permission blockchain. Depending on the business problem you're trying to solve, the use case you're working on, you can decide between whether you want to use a public or a permission blockchain. What these are, what are the differences is also something we will quickly look at. So these are typically the concepts that make up the blockchain. There's a very interesting visual demo. I'm not, because we don't have too much time today, I'm going to, like I said, share this link with all of you. Please go through this. It's a 15-minute kind of a visual demo where very clearly it explains the concept of what is a hash, what is block, what is a nonce, and what is blockchain, right? I'll just quickly give you an idea on how this actually works or what a block contains. So like essentially we spoke about the fact that a blockchain is essentially a series of or a set of blocks containing transaction data. So let's think of these as transactions. So there are multiple transactions which are floating around in a digital world. Each transaction has a identifier which is known as a hash, right? So what happens essentially in a block is all the transactions within a particular time frame when a block is created get converted into hash values, and multiple hashes you get combined hash values. So what you have in a block essentially is the following. So you have the combined hash value of all the transactions, right? So the first thing that you have in the block is the block address of the previous, or the block hash of the previous block. That is how it is linked with each other, right? Plus the combined hash of all the transactions, plus a timestamp. So the timestamp basically is important because it will tell you very clearly when the block was formed or when these transactions were validated and cleared. Then there is something called a nonce. Again, something that might take about 15-20 minutes to explain. I'll just give you 1 or 2 lines of what a nonce is. You can go back and then understand. I'm happy to help any of you who's interested. If you can come offline later, if you have any doubts, I'll be happy to clarify. So a nonce is essentially something which is, think of it like something that brings in balance to the difficulty level of creating a block. So essentially, a nonce is a abstract value starting with 4 zeros. So I'll tell you what happens in a blockchain when blocks get created. There are these thousands of nodes which are actually, let's say, they're competing or their processors are working double time to solve a puzzle. Let's say all the computers have to identify a particular set of characters. So starting with 4 zeros and say a few more characters. That whichever node, right, in the network is able to find that that particular nonce value is the one that gets to validate the block and put the information. So in a typical public blockchain, when a computer or a node does this, it gets rewarded with the cryptocurrency. So in a Bitcoin, so this is called mining. So we heard a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about mining. People say I'm actually doing Bitcoin mining. So what essentially happens is what I'm talking about. So the hardware that you have, right, with the processor, what it's trying to do is to try and solve this riddle, and whichever is able to do it first and is validated by the rest of the peer nodes gets a part of the cryptocurrency. So that is how this entire transaction system works, right? These processes are a little different in a permission blockchain, but to understand blockchain, this is the first thing that you need to know. Okay, so the nonce value is also there, and this entire thing, all this information is available in a block. So within that, so for example, in Ethereum blockchain, a block gets formed within 10 to 15 seconds. So all the transactions that are there within that time frame get into a block, get validated, and then are part of that block. So at any point in time, you can always go back to any block, any hash, and you can verify that information. So it brings in auditability, verifiability, immutability. These are 3-4 things that we've already explored. So in a nutshell, a blockchain is essentially a shared ledger, which means it's an append-only distributed system, so that we cannot modify it across a business network. It uses concepts of cryptography to ensure safe, secure, and authentic transactions, right? And it follows, or it uses a consensus mechanism to do that, where all parties agree to network verified transactions. And it uses a concept called smart contract. This is a very important aspect of a blockchain. So blockchain, in essence, that we saw so far is a database, right? So the smart contract is typically the business logic, right, which you write on top of the database to use the back end system to actually run your software code. So you can build a logic to do anything you want. So for example, I can create a blockchain enabled system for tracking and tracing organic produce. So my smart contract will typically be the business rules or the logic that I write, right, which will use the blockchain database in validating these transactions and storing the information in getting it back when required, all of that, right? So these are the key concepts that you need to understand. So what are the types of blockchains? So essentially blockchains can be public, consortium, or private. So examples of public blockchains are Bitcoin and Ethereum. Consortium blockchains could be Hyperledger Fabric or Poda. Now, a consortium could typically be, why do we need a permission blockchain? The example of a public blockchain or a use case is typically, say, if you want e-governance to work. So a lot of countries are today exploring e-governance on the blockchain. Dubai is one of the first countries to have said we will do this. Estonia has already put all their e-governance infrastructure on the blockchain. So anything from your driving license to your birth documents to all of that is on the blockchain, right? So when you have the entire public or the citizens of the country entering a system, you need a larger network where you don't have too many permissions to modify. So hence a public blockchain. Another example of a permission blockchain, for example, is, let's say there are 20 banks which come together. They are banks from different countries today, and they want to come together to share information. Currently, this process is very complicated. You have a lot of intermediaries, which is why if you transfer money, let's say you're an NRI, you go to the US and you're working there, let's say you earn a salary of $10,000 a month, you transfer every month $10,000 to your account in India. So essentially, your account in the US to your account in India. It takes time. In today's process, it takes time, and there is a fee. There are multiple intermediaries. You need to pay each of them. So if you transfer 10,000, you'll probably end up getting 9,200 or 9,300. So a lot of money is given out as fee. Now, is there a way to avoid all of this where I'm only transferring money from my account to my own account? Why should I pay these fees? The answer is yes. You could, if the stakeholders involved in these transactions can come together and work so that is where blockchain brings in trust. So far, these banks or these organizations or stakeholders don't come together because there is a lack of trust. With blockchain, that trust is enabled using this system. The blockchain protocol brings in that. And a consortium blockchain is when, say, 20 of these banks come together. There is no need for general public to be part of this network just for the back-end transactions. So it only these 20 people, so they can even create their own consensus mechanism. They can decide how many nodes are required for me to validate a transaction, how are you going to publish it, who's going to have what authority, all of that can get configured. So that is another variant. A private blockchain is typically something like a Ripple. Ripple is a pure payment system where they have created a system which can be used by banks or by countries. So it is a system created by a private party which can be used. So they have their own rules and regulations. So these are the different types of blockchains. Just to give you a broader idea of what we're talking about, let's look at a few of the important protocols. So these are the 3 different protocols I'm going to talk about. Ethereum is a public blockchain. Hyperledger and Corda are consort. These are why am I talking about these? These are the most used protocols today, right? So the differentiation, or what are we looking at in any blockchain protocol, is the basis of why this protocol was developed. What is its industry or utility, industry focus or utility? What is the architecture? What is the language in which you can actually write the code? Smart contracts, how do you do that? Consensus mechanisms used, the scalability, the privacy governance features, and the concept of a currency if it is there in the system. So if you look at the 3 that we spoke about, these are the differences. So this will give you a clear idea. So if you look at Ethereum, it's a generic blockchain platform, which is a public blockchain. When you say generic blockchain platform, it means that you can actually use the Ethereum network for you to write your, so in the Ethereum, there is a language called Solidity in which you can write your business code. So we have created, for example, identity management system on the blockchain. We have created multiple projects on that. So you can use the blockchain backbone in Ethereum and create your own business logic. Hyperledger Fabric is a modular blockchain platform, right? Which means, again, it's got specific methodologies by how it works. So the base or the overall idea is the same. It's decentralized, it's distributed, it uses cryptography, right? But the differences are in terms of the permissions and how you could use them. R3 Corda is a specialized distributed platform mostly for the financial industry. Now slowly other use cases people have started exploring. If you look at governance, it is governed in Ethereum, is governed by the Ethereum developer. So it's a public blockchain. So the community at large are actually people who decide. Hyperledger Fabric is the governance is by the Linux Foundation. For Corda, it's by R3. In terms of mode of operation, Ethereum is a permissionless public. Today you have a private variant within Ethereum. But in a sense, Ethereum is a permissionless public blockchain. Hyperledger is a permission private blockchain. Again, R3 is also a permission private blockchain. So what kind of consensus mechanisms are used? In Ethereum, they use what is known as a proof of work. This is also the same consensus that is used in Bitcoin. We're slowly going to, not slowly, probably soon going to move to what is known as a proof of stake. This proof of work consensus mechanism is pretty complicated and it takes a lot of time and energy. So now they have devised another consensus mechanism called proof of stake, which is probably going to be launched very soon. And Hyperledger Fabric, the advantage it offers is that it allows multiple approaches of consensus, right? So it uses Byzantine fault tolerance, so you can create your own plugin, so it's pluggable consensus. And here in Corda, again, specific notary nodes are used for consensus mechanism. So the concept and how you use these systems and for what are different. In Ethereum, the smart contracts are written I had explained the smart contracts are the business logic. So smart contracts are written in Solidity. Slowly, more and more languages are being developed. In terms of Hyperledger Fabric, Golang is the most preferred, while Java and a few others can also be used. Golang is the most preferred. In R3 Coda, Kotlin is the most preferred language. They started with the concept of having a smart legal prose, which means that even legal contracts could actually be inbuilt within the blockchain protocol. But that has currently been disabled for now, because the legal jurisdictions or legal aspects are different in different countries, not just countries, different in different states. So it becomes too large to explore currently. So this was something that they started off as an idea. In terms of currency, a public blockchain needs a currency for transactions to happen and payments to flow through. So Ether is the currency that is used in an Ethereum network. A Hyperledger Fabric, being a permission blockchain, doesn't require a currency or a cryptocurrency or a token system. But it is possible in a Hyperledger Fabric for you to create tokens if required. In case your use case demands the need for currencies or tokens, you could create. Right? So those are the differences between some of these. So this is a overall idea of what are the different blockchain protocols. And looking at only the top three, there are plenty of other protocols. So let's now look at the applications of blockchain. Some of the prominent use cases of blockchain, these are across industry segments. And COVID has actually accentuated the need for blockchain across many of these use cases. So peer-to-peer insurance lending is one huge use case where blockchain is being used. Cross-border money transfer. See, we spoke about how money transfer today takes time. And because of the lack of trust between banks, that doesn't happen. So a lot of companies, protocols are working on solving this problem using blockchain. Right? Distributed cloud storage. This is again a key use case. You're having a lot of blockchain companies which are being developed, a protocol being developed specifically for the concept of distributed cloud storage. Imagine the storage in every node in the system can actually be used for storing your information. Instead of a Google Cloud, for example, which is a centralized storage, you have distributed storage. It's a huge advantage because of safety, security, and a lot of other cost-related advantages. Health and medical records. I think recently the central government in India has also spoken about how there is a need for medical records to be made digital. So all of us should have control over our medical records. So in case I've had, let's say from childhood till I turn 40, all the records are available. It helps doctors who you go to give a clearer idea. But today we don't have that. And even if that information is available, it's like, anybody can access it. Right? So today we are looking at systems where your health and medical records can get tagged to your Aadhaar number and can be put on the blockchain and then given access to only with your permission, right? And then banking frauds can completely get detected and avoided using blockchain. Government corruption. So today a lot of state governments within India, the central government itself, they are exploring blockchain for various governance purposes. Some of you must have read about how Niti Aayog has experimented with subsidy distribution using blockchain, right? Now the government is looking at how academic records can be put on the blockchain. The POC or the proof of concept has already been done. I think the IITs are the first institutions whose academic records are going to be put on the blockchain. This year, I think it's already going to happen. Supply chain communications. Some of the projects that we are working on currently, one of the projects is end-to-end supply chain tracking and tracing of in agriculture. So an end-to-end traceability system for organic produce is something that we're doing using blockchain, right? Self-executing contracts. So an example for this is typically blockchain is always important that you have a convergence of multiple technologies. So for example, in self-executing contracts, one case study could be in Singapore, you have this concept of IoT and blockchain for probably giving out farm insurance. Let's say that you have a farm and it's flooded because of rains. In today's context, the time it takes for you to prove that it's been flooded, you'll have people coming and checking, and then by the time that insurance money gets paid, it takes a lot of time. But the farmer needs that money then and there. So imagine a scenario where IoT sensors in those farms can send out those signals. So if it crosses a particular threshold, then money can get automatically transferred to the farmer's account using the smart contract written on the blockchain, right? These are the kind of things that are happening today. Music royalty connection. So in the music industry, especially people who are independent musicians who have their channels on YouTube or who have their independent music channels, ensuring that they protect their IP becomes a huge challenge. So their blockchain can play a big role. Land rights management. Already some of the state governments in India have started putting the land records on the blockchain. Andhra, Telangana have already done it. Maharashtra is currently doing it. Even Karnataka is doing it. Digital identity security. So I mentioned this about, so imagine an Aadhaar. The problem of Aadhaar today is, I don't know if some of you have noted, about a year and a half back, the head of the UIDAI system came on Twitter and said that this is the safest system, digital identity system. The next day, somebody hacked that system and put that gentleman's details on Twitter itself. That's something that happened. So imagine all our data as citizens, our personal identifiable information, our social security details are all there. So we need a very robust, safe, secure system. Today, the central government is exploring a blockchain-backed Aadhaar stack, so which is very important development. Imagine your entire Aadhaar system on the blockchain to protect it and to give access for anybody who wants to verify it with your permission. So those are all things that are being done. So we also created a few use cases in that. Diamond. So anything to prove provenance of anything. So diamond is a large volume or high value asset. So ensuring that a diamond, if you need to know the source of the diamond, the fact that it's not a blood diamond, that it's not been sourced illegally, something like. So I also told you about supply chain in agriculture. So imagine you want to trace coffee or chocolate or any of these high volume, high value items. You need to check the beginning and the end. So the farm to fork, as we say in agri. But when it comes to other use cases, it's provenance, as it's called. So these are some of the prominent use cases. There are plenty of other use cases. We can keep coming up with more and more use cases, depending on whether that problem that we're trying to solve requires a backbone like blockchain. This is a very important thing to consider. So just an example of a few projects that we are working on. So we have AgriTrack, which is a complete end-to-end traceability system for agricultural produce. Then we have a digital background verification system called ScreenOut, a KYC system for banks using blockchain called OneID, unified loyalty system called DAppreciate. DApp is typically the any application created on the decentralized system is called a DApp. The bill discounting system called BillChain. These are a few of the projects. We've also created something for certification of payment terminals, right? And now let's look at what are the challenges and roadblocks in blockchain, right? Now, while there are a lot of advantages blockchain brings in, is it completely ready to be deployed and is it completely scalable? There are a few challenges that we face. One is in terms of a public blockchain, the speed and scalability, right? We still haven't reached the scale where we can do millions of transactions using a public blockchain. Regulatory uncertainty, right? So essentially, if you look at currently in India, there is no clear regulation for not just for cryptocurrency, but even using the blockchain protocol. So recently, I'm sure some of you have seen, the Tamil Nadu government came up with a policy, blockchain policy. The central government also came up, the Niti Aayog came up with a blockchain policy. These are all good positive steps in looking at a standardized methodology or some set of rules so that everybody can be on the same page, right? These are all things that are currently happening. Time taken for widespread adoption, right? So what's important is that this entire process of adoption happens fast. So you see that mobile phones have been adopted completely over the last 10 years. 10, 15 years back, maybe very few people used it, but now almost every village and every nook and corner of every part of the globe have mobile phones. So the speed and adoption is important. So how much time it's going to take is still a challenge, right? Standards. Are there clear standards set? But that's why I'm saying the permission blockchain, the multiple organizations or consortiums are creating multiple blockchains. So there are different standards, different protocols that are being developed for different problems. Slowly you will have a way in which all of these will converge, all of these will talk to each other. So those are the things that are important to understand. Industry consensus, this is also very important. I was on a session a couple of days back where industry bodies are today trying to see how they can play a role, whether it's a CII or a FICCI or a PhD, Chamber of Commerce. All of them are trying to play a role in trying to create this consensus in terms of the rules and regulations and how to use it. Next important question to understand is, do we actually need blockchain? So while it's become something that is something that everybody wants to try, it's important to know whether a particular use case or a business requires blockchain. You can't just force fit blockchain into every use case. So this is a simple template that you can use. So if you're trying to, let's say you're simple thing, you're all students, let's say you enter a hackathon and you want to, there are problems that are being given. If you're looking at a solution and you want to see if blockchain can be used, is going to be important in that solution, this is a template that you can use. You can check for whether multiple parties share data in that use case. Do multiple parties update data? Does it require verification? Does the business use case require verification? Are there multiple intermediaries? Is it a very complex process? Are there time-sensitive interactions? Do the transactions interact with each other? So the thumb rule is that if you have 3 or more of these, if you have a tick mark and 3 or more of these, it means that there is a good chance for you to explore blockchain. If it is not, then you will probably use any existing legacy system, right? Okay, so this is what I wanted to share. I'm open for any questions now. Yes, can you all hear me? Are there any questions? Pragdish, I think you have to unmute. I can't hear you, Pragdish. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
I think some technical issues. One second.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? I can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm getting your voice.
Okay. If there are any questions, if somebody is giving you any questions, I'll be happy to take those.
I think we're receiving as of now from the chat box.
Okay.
Sir, are you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So, Akit, thanks for the time and thanks for the session. Actually, we have some clarity about the blockchain and actually which streams we can use the blockchain technology. I think we're not getting responses. Maybe you can share your contact details in the chat box, so maybe the people can have a direct. They will reach you directly. At the same time, I'm having some questions from my side. The Intellectex show, what are the focus? So what you have focused into blockchain? So what are the future plans? Like how can we take the blockchain to the next level? So let me know about that one. So we have that question.
Yeah. So there are a lot of projects that people are exploring blockchain as a backbone. Government is exploring. A lot of industry segments are exploring. So I had explained currently the one important project that we are working on in partnership with NABARD is this traceability system in agri, right? And simultaneously we're also working on projects. So I showed the 5 or 6 different projects that we are working on. Interestingly, there are a lot of new things that are coming up. Challenge today is more in terms of knowledge that there are not enough blockchain programmers. Right. So our aim is also to try and educate as many people as possible, get more and more people to get onto, because the career progression or the opportunities are great. In the next 3-4 years, you will find that with the government also coming up with their own set of policies, there is a huge need, and you'll start seeing big organizations also start hiring for blockchain professionals.
Okay.
This is something.
Fine, sir. So blockchain is a booming scenario. So like blockchain is a booming sector. So apart from that booming sector, so how the technology background students, like we can take example of engineering students. So like people don't aware of the blockchain technological background. So like I just want to get your input for the students, maybe who are pursuing or who are going to complete it. So how they can impart their skills into blockchain, and how they can be a startup into a blockchain. So what is the need and what is the current requirement in the market, sir?
Okay, so essentially, if you see, for somebody to get into blockchain, there are 2 routes. For technical folks, students, people who are into programming, you would want to learn one of these. So you can decide whether you want to start with Ethereum or Corda or Hyperledger and learn one of those languages, right? So there are a lot of courses that offer this learning. So we have a course that we run on Ethereum. So I actually teach at MIT, I teach at Symbiosis. We have an MOU with the Malaysian government where we're creating a center of excellence for blockchain. So a lot of these initiatives involve education. We do a lot of sessions for people to understand blockchain, be it at a business level or at a technical level. So in terms of career opportunities for students, there are 2. For those who are not in a technical line, you can understand blockchain and use it as part of your domain. So the example is agriculture. We're doing, about the courses we do for the Agri University. So here, the Agri students are actually people who are going to use a lot of technology once they pass out in whichever organization they're going to work for. They're going to be scientists or they're going to work for organizations. And technology is becoming important in every industry. So the understanding of blockchain will help them actually know where you can use this and how it can benefit. So it's important that everybody gets to understand, which is why we're doing this even for government departments. We're doing it for private companies. So there is a need to have a basic understanding of what is blockchain, what can it do, what can it not do, where can I use it, where should I not use it, how do I evaluate a use case, and what is the backbone, how does it work. These are conceptual things that we saw today. While A 45-minute session is not enough. It took
Yeah.
me a few months to understand, and on a daily basis, you need to continue to learn. This is a starting point. Of the 100 plus people who came, you'll probably have a few people who will find this interesting. We'll go back and say, I need to explore this. Just like I got interested in this 5 years back, right? So that's and there are courses. So to answer your question clearly, there are courses that are available either for technical people or for non-technical people.
Sure. So basically what we discussed earlier also, we'll have collaborations with Intelitex also and with your firm also. So like that, after that we can proceed. How can we proceed? And also like from introduction to technical and non-technical, like that one. Soon we'll have a collaboration with Intelitex, and also we can have your training to the students also, and also to the other people who are interested in blockchain technology. Thanks for that 1 hour session, and also we would like to have an in-person session soon. I think we'll have mostly by October end or November first week.
Sure.
Thanks for sir.
Thank you for having me, and it's good to see a lot of students showing interest in this technology, and happy to be come there in person and interact with the students.
Sure. So we are not in the sure. So based on the interest, what you got exposure we have shared today. So like it's not enough. What you said, I agree that it's not enough for 45 minutes. So people would have for 1 week or 1 month or 3 months. So we will plan it, and accordingly we will act on that one. So thanks for your today's session, and also soon we will have a collaboration, and we will move forward with our objectives. So like it's a win-win situation. So thanks for the time, sir. Thanks once again, and thank you participants. So we'll meet in the other upcoming series. Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you. Good day. Bye.